strategy.
Hello and welcome to the Old Young Scrum with me, Samuel Baines, my resident old player, Simon Foll, and today a special guest tuning in from France, from the beautiful Alps, or somewhere mountainy.
Pyrenees.
Sorry, should have known that. I don't pay attention in geography. James Percival. How are you, James?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Good to be here. Yourselves, you good?
We're okay. How are you, Foley?
Yeah, I'm wonderful, mate. I'm sorry I'm late. Technology's got the better of me again. It's this modern Zoom, and every time I go on Zoom for work. But anyway, enough about me. James, good to see you, mate. How you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thanks. Good.
I want to jump straight into this because I kind of want to get this out of the way. The Lions. I'm guessing we all watched the game.
I didn't actually watch the game, mate. I'll be honest with you.
Lucky you.
I've been watching the football.
Oh, to be fair, the football probably had more action in than the Lions game.
Yeah, I don't tend to normally watch the warm-up games. I just watch the test games, to be honest. I've got two young kids. I've got a 7 and a 3-year-old. So sometimes finding time to watch some of the sport is it's difficult to do. Between kids, training, and work, it's finding the time.
My dad found a great way around that. He just ended up getting me addicted to it as well.
What about your mom? That's the one.
She didn't really care. Simon, did you watch the Lions?
I did. I managed to watch. I was away camping again, and I'm gonna have to make a confession. I went to the 2020 on Friday night. Managed to drink rather a large amount of beer. Managed to do a bottle of port, some vodka. So it was a little bit grim on Saturday afternoon, I must admit. But I did watch it, and much like James said, it doesn't mean anything at this stage. It's not really a Lions cap. It's just about getting the squad together and getting them on a field. So you can't read too much into it.
Okay, let's go to something much more fun. Harlequins. We've got someone who is an ex-Quin. That's been called the greatest final, ever. Do you agree, James?
It's hard to say whether it's the greatest one ever. I'm sure it's been said a few things, but I think for what they achieved in the season is definitely a great achievement. To go from where they were with Gustard, and then to obviously finish at where they are is pretty special. Mate, the best thing about it was seeing the style of rugby they played, because I know when I was there under Dean Richards, everything was about tempo, expression, and just having a go. And it sort of looked like they'd gone back to that a bit. Obviously, Nick Evans was there during that period when that was all sort of the main DNA of Harlequins, as to say. Charlie Moore-Crone's there. Jordan Turner-Hall was part of that as well. So you've sort of got a coaching staff who were sort of bred into that sort of culture. And to see that on the pitch, mate, it's not very often I say it, but I watched that game and I wanted to get my boots back on again and play. So if that happens normally, it's a sign for me that it was a pretty good match. A lot of games I can watch and I look at it, oh, thank God I'm not playing. Or when you've played quite a few games of rugby, it's quite hard to get the motivation before a game. You're taking more and more caffeine every time, but watching that game, it was mate, it was a pretty incredible match.
For me, there's not. If you look back, I remember watching the first game of this campaign. It was Sale Newcastle, the most god awful game I've ever seen. It was a kick followed by kick. It was awful, and I thought, this is going to be a hard season to get through with no crowd and crap rugby. And then, Harlequins, January, couldn't buy a win. They looked down and out. Gustard left in a, I don't know, he couldn't get anything out of that group of players. What this guy did and came in is phenomenal, because they saw off Bristol, who was my tip, we're going to go all the way. And you think, right, they've done their semi-final, that's them done and dusted. They can't get to that level again. And then, they wow, they did it again, with a belief and a self-belief that is. I hope it stays with them. They've been a bit like the Saints. They've been underachievers for far too long, but maybe that's a new era. And if they can keep that kind of a squad together, mate, they're going to be an awesome force to be reckoned with. I thought it was a great final, and yeah, the best team won. The most attacking options. They tried everything. When Exeter took that kick, you thought they've bottled it. This is not in the script of this game. You got to go for the juggler, and they didn't, and that was the downfall. So yeah, well done, Quins. James, you must be a proud ex-Quin.
Yeah, man, I love my time at Quins. I was doing an interview with Russell Earnshaw the other day, and we were talking about culture and what the team was, and it was probably the best time of my playing career, to be honest. The time I had there, some incredible players, incredible man manager in Dean Richards. He was absolutely unbelievable to work under. I know there's been a fair few words said after the blood scandal, but I'll put my hand on my heart and say it's the best culture I've ever been part of, and there was never a bad moment there. Some of the boys there, and to be honest, we did our weight training in the squash court. We did our rugby training on a Roehampton pitch, but it was like I was with my mates every day training, and that was the great thing. It was work with Dino. It was work hard and play hard, and he made rugby simple, and that's sort of how it looked again in the finals. Rugby was simple again, like a young lad. Marcus Smith does a goose step in the middle of nothing, draws a defender, and it sets up a try, and just things like that. It's just go out there and have fun, and I think that's what rugby's about, to be honest. Too many times these days you get put in a box or this system, that system, and you sort of lose the reason why you played rugby. And to see that, it was pretty amazing, yeah.
The goose step, we all saw it coming. Everybody knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just held Johnny Hill for that minute to allow Line. I mean, he's a fantastic talent, and I God hope that English rugby keeps hold of him.
Yeah.
Because he must be on the radar of some sides in France and various places. But yeah, like you say, rugby, the number on your back is what you do at scrum and line out and kick off. Apart from that, there's a player in that side, and just brilliant. Yeah, good to be.
I love Danny Care as well, mate. I can't say enough about him as a player. Danny Care, mate, is incredible on the training pitch, on the match day as a bloke. He's an incredible player to play with. Probably, I still think he's one of the best nines around. So to not be picked in England, I think it's that whole fact again that he doesn't really fit in a box. He's a bit of a maverick, but that's what makes Quins. And I think in international rugby, coaches want to play the safe bet sometimes. So that's probably why he doesn't get the look in. And when you've got a 10 around you that wants to do the same thing and a bunch of forwards who run lines off you all the time, it makes a difference. But he's incredible. He makes that team. He's the heart of Quins, to be fair.
I was just about to talk about Danny. His defensive prowess in that game was beautiful. If you watched how he pressured Joe Simmons, how he pressured both the Simmons brothers, the speed of him, not the biggest chap on that pitch, far from it. It might have been better to have chucked Don Brandt at some of those bigger buggers, but he still got the job done, and he still allowed for those opportunities for Quins.
Yeah, he's quality, absolute quality.
You talk about Don Brandt as well. I thought he had a great game as well. He looked better than I know. Simmons got a turn of pace, which is great, and he's got a nose for the line. But Don Brandt, he runs some incredible lines, and he just clicks with Marcus Smith. They seem to know where each other is, and that's not luck. That comes off the training field, and like James said, that's a culture where they'll be close in the change room, they'll be close having a coffee. The whole thing. At the end of the game, they were so close as a squad. It was great to see that togetherness and that tightness. And like you say, that's not bought and paid for. That's not paid for by a salary. That is lads living under an umbrella of culture which they respect and want to be a part of.
The other thing I was having, as I said, I spoke to Russell and I was having a conversation with him. We were talking about coaching, and I went back to Quins. I think it would have been a couple of years, just on the gap of just before COVID, the October before COVID. So a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was there, And Gustard was there, and I walked into a culture, and there's pictures on the wall, a bear in the changing rooms, and that, and I was like, it felt alien to me because it wasn't the Quins I knew. And I said to a couple of the boys, I was like, mate, what is all this? It seems a bit put on. It seems like all these posters and culture are put there to create something that isn't necessarily there. And maybe what Gustard did at Sarri's worked, the Wolfpack thing and that. And sometimes you're trying to transfer one thing to another club, it doesn't work. But Billy Millard was there when I was there, and he was sort of like I guess you'd look at him as a human resource manager within the team, keeping boys happy, talking to boys. And this is a conversation I was having. I was thinking maybe part of the reason they've done so well is because they've got Billy Millard at the top. He's a sort of not mentor, but a go-to man for the coaches, someone they can put their problems onto, talk openly with, without the pressure of a rugby manager above them, but it's more of a people manager. So then that allows the coaches to express themselves. And when a coach can express himself, it passes down to players because that pressure isn't there. And for me, I was sort of thinking, well, is this the future of rugby, to have this, to take that big DOR at the top out and have someone who can actually man manage, which, to be honest, when I had Dean Richards, that's what he is a man manager. He only ever came on the training pitch once. And that's when we lost away to Newcastle and we did an hour of smashing the absolute shit out of each other in the pissing down rain. But every other time from that, he never got involved in training. He'd sit and watch and he would just manage the coaches. And it worked then. And for me, I think that's probably a good way going forward because there's so much pressure on coaches now from above. You've got the money men, or in France, the presidents who put pressure on that guy, and it passes down. It always passes down. And if you've got someone there who's actually looking out for the coaches, I think that's a massive step forward in the evolution of rugby, to be honest.
I was just about to say to you, James, because I know in France sometimes you've got team managers and then you've also got the director of rugby as two separate roles.
Yeah.
Does that kind of breed that mentality, or do you just think that doesn't? Do you think?
No, I'll give you a good example of how it works in France. So I was coaching, and we won our 7 first games of the season, 4 with a bonus win. We lost our first game, which was a derby match, which wasn't even a game of rugby. It was pretty much a scrap for 80 minutes. Half time, the president comes in, having a go at some of the boys. Full time, comes in, tells every single player and every member of staff that if we don't win the next game, everyone's sacked. Comes in the gym the next morning, says the same thing to everyone, and just absolutely killed the culture. And we hadn't even lost the game before that. We'd won our 7 games. And the problem with that sort of president, which doesn't really exist in England as much, is that they're reliant on sponsors, their money, and because they feel that they're putting all their money and they have a right to what happens, they can't just sit back. And it's a massive with a bit of French emotion, it can be quite complicated. Yeah. It's hard to deal with. Very hard. So as a player, as a coach, yeah, it's hard.
Foley, I know that you've got a story quite similar to that. I've heard you tell it in hospitality before about losing a game and someone walking in and naming all your previous jobs before you turned pro. But is that different?
That was many years. We'd only just been professional. I think it turned in 95. I think it was 96 when they actually, the first year we were kind of part-time. So we were getting paid to play and also doing a bit of work. And in 96, that was it. We were full-time in the culture, in the thing. And we'd gone through a run of, we'd got Ian McGeechan as coach. And you talk about man managers, he's probably one of the worst. And we'd lost a few games. And we sat in a team meeting. In walked Keith Barwell, all smiley and happy in his suit, and he looked around the room and he pointed at Bates and said, "Policeman." Pointed at me and said, "Welder." Pointed at Rodders, like army captain, and went around the room and said, "Guys, do you enjoy playing professional rugby?" And we were like, "Yes, Keith." He said, "Because if you don't start getting some fucking wins, then you're going to go back to your day jobs." We're like, "Okay, Keith." And off he went. You know, that was his, again, like James said, that's how he was in business. And for us, we went out and won the next game and we were fine. Yeah. But it was a real, I don't think it happened now. You wouldn't ever get Mark Darban going into the change room and preaching like that. But back in our day, yeah, Keith Barwell has invested an awful lot of money, and he felt he could say that, and back then you get away with it. But
still happens, mate. Still happens today. Still happened throughout my career. The same thing. So
yeah. Well, you talk to Ali Heifer and talk about Tony Rowe. Poor old Larks was, again, I think he'd got him into 2 finals. They'd lost both finals, but had a cracking season, and he sacked him. And to rub salt in the wound, employed Ali Heifer the week after, and Ali was almost a deputy to Larks at the Saints. It was pretty horrific, and we all said to Ali, "You must be mad. He's horrible. He's a horrible bastard." But Ali's formed a relationship with him, but yeah, I don't think he'll ever quite trust him. I don't think he's. I know you looked at him after the game, and he stood there with Rob Baxter, and Rob Baxter looked like a scolded schoolboy.
I saw that image.
He was the prefect that hadn't performed, and with people like that, they're successful for a reason, and you can't say that Exeter have gone off the boil.
Yeah.
But they were just, it was funny to see.
You've got to be the difference is you've got to be ruthless within business to be successful, but in rugby there are ruthless players, to be fair, and coaches, but I'd probably say 90% of players are there for the bond and the emotional tie of playing for each other, loyalty, honour, and those sort of things. So yeah, it's when you get those businessmen at the top. To be fair, Cecil was never. He came. I remember him coming down a few times, questioning things and that. But Cecil wasn't too bad at Worcester, to be honest. Keith didn't really say a lot when I was at Northampton, even though that was the season they got relegated. No, it was the season after I left. I think they got relegated. Quins, never saw the money men at Quins, so no, it wasn't too bad there. But yeah, I've seen a few good examples of it. I remember I had Richard Hill. We were in Switzerland on a pre-season friendly, and for some reason Hilly organised a wine tasting evening and said to the boys, "Right, just do the wine tasting and don't go out after." Mate, what he was thinking. And then he gave a curfew. I think a curfew was at 12. And then I think it was about 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning. Boys hear some pounding through the hotel rooms. And Alan Carter, Richard Hill, are looking for Andy Good and Tavita Tomapo. And they're not there. And then the next day, they end up getting them, like 2 naughty kids, finding them in the nightclub, pulling them in like 2 naughty kids. And the next day we were sat in this hotel restaurant. Hilly literally went through every single player one by one and told them exactly what he thought of them. I was all right, mate. I got through it quite good, but some of it.
Got the hand grenade out that night, then.
No, mate. No. The night before, I think we were out the night before. To be honest, it was out then for sure. But no, mate. It was quite an experience.
I guess you remember Andy Newman. Do you remember Nooms from second row boy? Well, we did the same. We were sponsored by a company called the Wine Corp, and they did a sponsored evening where the boys were in tasting the wine, and John Steele said, "Right, lads, play the game, have a glass of wine, don't take the piss. We're here for the sponsors, not here for you lot to get pissed." And Nooms and Jacko got absolutely stoated. They were drinking wine like it was Ribena. And I remember I stood with Steely as a senior player, and I was trying to get Nooms' attention. Was like, "No, stop, mate." Anyway, the next day, turn up for training, and Steely comes in. He said, "Nooms, Jackson, go and see Paskey." Paskey absolutely beasted him for an hour. Nooms was throwing up, and and then Steely came in and said, "Don't take the piss."
Yeah, man.
I'm glad it still happens. I hope it still happens to this day, but I think
I had a period when I was out drinking. I called Dean Richards at 5 in the morning, left him a voicemail. Don't remember doing it. Woke up at 3. Woke up Sunday morning on my mate on Tanny Fuga's sofa. having a text message off Dean said, come to my office at 8 a.m. on Monday. I had no idea what I'd said. I was just like, oh, I think I rolled over on my phone when I was asleep on the sofa. Sorry, Dean. He's like, pretty much said, F off, see you at my office. Got to his office on the Monday morning with the biggest sweat patches under my arms. Walked in his office and he just gave me my P45. And Dino would love silence, mate. I think it's an employer being a copper. He'd say nothing. So we just sat there in silence for about 5 minutes. He's like, so what do you think of that? I was like, well, there's nothing I can say about it. I've got to take it, haven't I? And then he just snatched it off me, ripped it up. He's like, the only time you effing call me is at 5 a.m. in the morning when you're locked up in the clink and you need me to get you out. Get out of my effing office. You could tell he didn't look down on it. He'd obviously done it a few times, but the fact that he was like, if he ever locked up, call me and that. But nah, mate, it was funny. Good times with him.
If I try and bring us back to some Premiership,
Sorry.
Championship related stuff, Saracens are back. Will they give Quins a run for their money next season?
No, they're not going to have the same budget. They're not going to have the same budget. I know a few boys. I know a few players they're looking at, to be honest, and the salaries they're offering on like they were before. And I think they're going to be even under more scrutiny than before. So they're going to have to be whiter than white on every single detail. So no, mate. I think if they get mid-table this next season, I think it'll be good goings. They've obviously got some really good players, but I think the next 2 years with no relegation, I think it'll be a sort of building period for them again.
You've just given me the ultimate segue to the 14-team stuff. Thank you so much. 14 teams in the Prem. Slowly, was that a grimace of dismay that I just saw there, or was that
sport is all about, I'm sorry, winners and losers and relegation, and you can't, if there's no jeopardy, some of the games toward the end of the season will be like, well, an absolute waste of time. The crowd are not going to go. I think you'll do the game damage. Rugby is a sport that is, you go out to win a game. You don't go out to draw or you're going to chuck a load of academy in at the end just because you're not going to go anywhere, or you're going to chuck in all the old farts and save your best for the week after. No, I disagree with it. That's my point of view.
Yeah.
James, I know you have a slightly different opinion on this because I'm very skillful with Instagram polls. What do you reckon about going to 14 teams in the Prem?
My opinion is, I think having more teams in the Prem is not a bad thing. So obviously, Ealing have got the funding to come up and to come into the Premiership. I think them having to stay in the Championship all the time is a bit of a waste for them. It's a bit difficult. They're better than what they are in the Championship. They've got the money to create a good club, to create another big brand within rugby. I think that's a really good thing. But I think the no relegation ring fence is an absolute waste of time. Being a player who's been in a relegation battle a few times with Worcester and having got relegated, you know what? As though it's horrible every single week to be in that shit fight to say, it actually gives reason to what you're doing. And I think not to have that reason, there's probably would have been a few games we would have gone out there and just said, oh, boys, it doesn't really matter. We go in the changing rooms after and go, oh, well, it doesn't really matter, boys. And then I've been in a situation where, like with Quins, we've been getting to the Premiership semis and things like that. When I was playing there, if you come across those teams one week that can't really be bothered because they know they're going to lose anyway, then it affects the whole table, really. You're going to have teams at the top of the table who are lucky one week playing against, I don't know, Worcester, they want to play their young boys or something, or Six Nations, they'll be putting pretty much just a second team out. I just think it defeats the whole object of the game, to be honest. And I'm sure there's other Championship clubs, more money within that Championship, and it kills the Championship in a way that are already struggling for money as well. And I've played in the Championship. I was on loan at Bedford after I broke my neck at Northampton. I was on loan with Coventry when I was younger. And you know what? It's probably the best time of my rugby career, apart from Quins and things. But it's something different. I actually remembered what rugby was. I remember when I was at Bedford, there was Heinzie and Mike Greer on the front of the bus with their cheese, pickle, and their wine every match on the bus for every match, and that was there. And then I remember there's a guy at Coventry, an old hooker called Aggie, and he used to drink his Hobgoblin. He had a testimonial drinking the Hobgoblin before the game, and it just really created a real sense of rugby. And I probably met one of my best mates while at Coventry, who was Sean Perry. Yeah. So not to have that competition and to kill that championship off, it's massive. It kills the game a bit. And I think the best thing would actually invest some money and actually take the championship off the RFU and create a form of professional league like the Premiership League, where there can be money put into it, capital into it, and if they do bring some Welsh teams in or South African teams and create something different to the Premiership, where those clubs will get a chance to get bigger.
Yeah, I know from talking to Dylan, the Championship is apparently an amazing place to play. Apparently it is, because it's that verge between, it's still professional, but it's also, you can still go and have fun with it more. It seems like less of a chore, and it seems more like rugby is what boyhood rugbies are supposed to be, like that fun with your mates. Growing the Premiership by investing in another league, I think that's an interesting point. I haven't got a business degree. I haven't got any business qualifications, but I've got. I don't know how that would work. But I do know that coronavirus has actually been pretty good for the Championship. I was talking to James Mitchell the other day about it. Foley, how do you feel about the Championship?
As James said, the Saints are putting guys into Bedford at the moment to get game time. They can't get game time at the Saints. So, yeah, and you talk to some of the young lads, and they absolutely love it. They love being part of a big fish in a small pond, let's say. But make no bones about it, Championship is a bloody hard place to go, because you've got guys that have maybe on the downward slope somewhat, but have still got a wily old head and know their way around a referee and a game. You talk about the Championship, it's been good for them. I think they've all had loans. They're all going to have to pay these back, and they need to. The RFU need to generate income that flows down into that Championship. Otherwise, it's gonna fall flat. And you do, as James said, we need to keep reinventing what the competition is all about. And if we've spoken to guys from the MLR, you get a decent American side and Argentinian, and all of a sudden, the world's a small place when global pandemic's over. Why not? We look at the Tri-Nations and think how wonderful it is. People look at the Six Nations and say how wonderful. If you could bring a bit more of that, Welsh, the Pro 14, is that an exciting league? Have you ever watched a Pro 14 game? Probably not. So rugby has to think hard and fast about how it continues to support grassroots, and the Championship is massively important. And I'd hate to see it slip away if they can't get a chance of getting the funding to get them into the Premiership, then it becomes an old boys club and it's never going to get any investment.
Yeah. Just touching on that as well, where you said people on the up and people on the down. I think I touched on it earlier. One of the best experiences for me while I was at Bedford was I was underneath John Phillips, and I played next to him every single week, and I learned a lot off that bloke just watching him. I learned how to be a physical, how to be a nose, how to learn the dark arts. Just being around him, I learned so much that I would never have learned being around another 25, 26-year-old Premiership pro. And I think that was a massive part of me being at Bedford. And the same with some of the older lads at Cov, but they weren't second rows. But having John Phillips there for me was a massive learning curve.
You can now catch the dark arts off John Phillips by just looking at his beard long enough.
JP, you talk to any of the front row, he sent so many punches through, missed and twatted the front row. He was enormously, wow. The guy did 385 games for the Saints. And he's still playing now, believe it or not. We've had him on the podcast, and I have him at the Saints quite a bit, interviewing him. You know, he astounds me. I don't think he'll ever hang his boots up. Yeah, even on the beer, he's still galloping the beers down him as well. Still, I follow him on Strava. He's fit as a flea again. He's shed a load of weight and doing the weights, and yeah, phenomenal man.
Yeah, good bloke.
And yeah, horribly good fun.
Yeah.
I've been in some scrapes with him, not for this podcast, but.
But a touch on again, when I was at Bedford, we had younger than me. We had Dan Cole,
Yeah.
Pinar, the old Leicester Tigers back rower. Both the Youngs brothers were there in our team. We had so many boys who 2-3 seasons after Bedford just absolutely smashed it in the Premiership. I remember being at Bedford, phoning my agent and going, "Mate, this tight head prop, you need to sign him up, mate. He's unreal." And then 2 seasons later, he's playing for England. I phoned my agent up, said, "Where's my cut?"
There's me,
saw it.
I'll tell you what, Bedford has got the nicest atmosphere for the club. Because even though it's got a junior club that isn't attached, it kind of still is in a way. And I've got my Bedford Blue shirt in my room. I play down there at the juniors, going to smash a couple lads around, playing big ugly number 8. But yeah, let's talk about rugby around the world now, because obviously James is in France, obviously we're in England, and obviously we've had Americans on. I feel like we're going to become the centre of global rugby at one point, like little black hole in the middle. Not yet, but one day we will. What's rugby like over there, James? How is the French televised games treating you? How is the French rugby treating you?
On TV, it looks the same, but when you're in the environment, it's so hard to explain. Like, there's things that happen that you wouldn't even believe if I told you about it. It's a different culture, and that's the biggest problem. A lot of English people, the way we live in England, the culture we have, you can't even compare to the culture in France. And I think every foreign player who comes to France, probably more so the English, the Islanders, they're pretty laid back. South Africans, it's a better lifestyle than what they've got back home, so they're more appreciative. And I think when the English come over, and I think it's that island mentality we have, that we think what we do is best and it's how it should be done. So you come over here with the imagination of top 14, big money, superstars. It's going to be amazing, but you're like, what's going on here? This is 10 years behind. My physio can't even do a massage. They don't even know what this stretch is. What are the weights I'm doing? And they're about 10 years behind, mate, genuinely. But you've got to come over here. You're not going to change things, and you've got to embrace the lifestyle. And it took me a year to realise that, to be honest. And that's why a lot of players come over here and fail, or want to go back home, because they don't embrace that culture and lifestyle. I think I was lucky because I came over towards the end of my career. So it got to a point where I was like, well, okay, I'm not going to play international, or I'm not going to do anything, accept it now. But I think if I was here as a 23, 24, 25-year-old, I think it'd be really hard for me. I think I'd miss England too much. On TV, it looks great, mate. Yeah, it looks great on TV. It's lights, big crowds, fancy players and everything, but the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. I remember I was speaking to someone, and the Toulon coach signed the memory loss. The winger now who's at Worcester, who was at Northampton and Sarries, played for England. Ashton, sorry, yeah, I forgot. And he's talking to the president of Toulon. He's like, they're talking about a different wing. They're like, we want to sign this winger. He's a top quality player. And he's like, no. Me, I want to sign Ashton. They're like, why? What do you want him for? Because I love how he scored the try. And when he scored the try like that, the crowd go crazy. And literally, although he's a talented player, that was the only reason the president really wanted him, because of that. And that's sort of how it is, mate. It's a bit the Wild West, but I love the lifestyle out here. I've embraced it. The weather's good, and to be honest, my aim is to stay out in France. But the rugby is very different. It is very different, and I think it's more the fault of the English, because we think everything should be done the way we feel. But who says it's wrong? Maybe we're just wrong.
I know. Speaking of Simon Heath, he did some time at Colomiers. And he embraced it, as you say. He said it was a massive head shock. you know, that they'd go train and kick shit out of each other, and then they'd go and have a bottle of wine and a sit, a full lunch for an hour and a half. That was what they did, and he couldn't quite get his head around that, and he said, most of the players smoked,
Yeah.
which surprised him, but he adored it as well. He said, it's such a difference that you can't fight it. You either go with it or you don't fit in.
Yeah.
An hour and a half of lunch.
Yeah, they're big on sitting down and having a proper meal.
Props must love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, mate. So even for me, we'd literally train in the morning. You'd be finished at 11:30, and until 2 o'clock, you'd be back home, and then you go back training at 2:30. Every training session, because it's so important in France at lunchtime. Office workers have the same, to be with family, to eat with family, and pretty much all the French go to restaurants or go back home and have cooked food. Even the schools, you can go and pick your kid up from school, bring them home to have lunch with the family, and take them back.
I'm booking my tickets to France.
And France is one of the most productive nations in the world, believe it or not. So we think we slog our guts out for 40, 50 hours a week. Who's got it right? Maybe them.
Yeah. That's the thing. That's the great thing about here. For me, they still have a culture. I think culture's being lost a bit in England now, and family values. And I know when I played rugby, your life is rugby and everything's rugby. And I've even played where there's a lad who had to play a second team match, and his kid was ill in hospital. He was just being born, really ill, and he was crying on the pitch at the same time he was playing because the coach wouldn't let him go to the hospital to see his kid. And there's 100 examples of that in English rugby. The rugby's first, and that's it. Whereas in France, if that happened, they'd be like, no, you take a week off, take 2 weeks off. The family is the most important thing. And the one thing I think they've got really good in France is that life and work balance, which I think sometimes gets lost in England. It's rugby, 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 and they forget that sort of players do have a life as well.
Do you believe that life-work balance makes being a pro in France so different, and also makes that after rugby life so much better?
Yeah, massively. And I think another good thing in France that benefits players, I don't know if you know, that in France, when you finish playing, you get a thing called chômage, which gives you 2 years of sort of unemployment, but you obviously pay for it throughout your contract. Your employer pays towards that, and I think that's a massive thing. That's a massive thing for players and pros to transition into things they want to do. Whereas I think in England, players finish. I was on a group the other day, and there's 2-3 players who are labourers now, and there's not that opportunity to have that. And I think if clubs should invest more into players for that post rugby. I know they help to find jobs and things like that now, but I think to be on a big contract and then financially have nothing the next year, I think is really hard. And I think more planning needs to be done to invest into a player post rugby, even if the clubs say we're going to put 2,000 away a month, or depending on the value of that contract to the player. So when they finish, they do have that sort of stopgap.
Yeah, it's massive that, when I was probably the first one into the professional, and you had young lads coming into it who all they ever knew was rugby. And, it's the best job in the world. You're with 20 of your best mates day in, day out. But when it finishes and you've almost haven't got any qualifications, and it's hard. Paul Tupai, Tom Stevenson, all these boys have been through an emotional roller coaster of, wow, what am I going to do next? And it destroys people. And you make a good shout there that the afterlife of rugby needs managing, because you're on a massive high, you're a professional sportsman, and like you say, the next week if you're not have a university degree, or you're not trained in anything other than rugby, and you haven't cleared the bar in financially, it's a horrible wide world out there that is going to swallow you up if you're not careful. Like you say, I think Steve Thompson now, he's digging holes for a living.
That's big to Steve. Yeah. But the thing is, mate, as well as I know how fast I still feel like yesterday I was 21 and still at Northampton in a way, and it flies by. And the money the boys earn these days. I know boys are setting up businesses, and that's where that debate can come in of what Sarries were doing. Was it wrong or right? In my eyes as a player, but I think it was fantastic what they were doing for players. Is it cheating or is it actually caring about the players? If the Premiership did bring something in that, how many boys have got their own successful businesses from what Sarries gave them and invested in them? That's another question for me. Is it cheating? Well, if other clubs can do it, why not? Because it benefits the players' lifestyle after as well. And if how many of those players are going out drinking, buying fancy cars or the houses, and not thinking to invest that extra $1,000 a month into post rugby if they put that their whole career? So yeah, that's a big thing for me in rugby, and the differences. That's a big part of it post rugby as well.
This has been an amazing podcast. I'm actually going to cut it short because we're going to end up going over my bedtime as well. But James, you've been amazing. So good to have you. We'll have to have you back because you're bringing up all these issues that, as someone, I sit here and I write the agenda. I haven't been through the professional ranks of rugby. Not yet, hopefully. One day I'll do. But, I think you bring up these issues that do need to be spoke about, and that view on Saracens, I know Dylan Hartley had a very similar view when talking about it, and I think it's amazing. So I think we do need to unbind from this scrum, and James, we'd love to have you back in the future.
Pleasure, anytime. Pleasure.
Yeah, James, thank you so much, mate. Good to see you. Looking well.
Cheers, mate. Yeah.
Still handsome as ever.
And you, mate, you got a nice little tan there. Dyed your hair grey as well. Silver fox.
No, it's silver now. It's not grey, it's silver.
You've been on the sunbeds as well.
No, mate. No. I do a bit of work outside, and I try and get out as much as I can. So
that's why you're so shit on the computers then.
Yeah, I'll take that from you.
Never mind. Anyway, pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure so much. Very much.
Have a good one.